Welcome to the Encompassing Cancer podcast, brought to you by Cancer Pathways. Throughout our show, we'll dive into the socio-emotional impacts of cancer, share support resources, talk to experts in the community, and hear patient and survivor stories. Really anything that encompasses the cancer experience. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Hello there, and welcome back to the Encompassing Cancer podcast. June is National Cancer Survivors Month, where we are focused on enhancing and improving the quality of life for people diagnosed with cancer, and also spotlighting ways that you can get involved to help more people become survivors. There are so many nuances to cancer survivorship and life after treatment, which we're very much planning on dedicating an entire episode to. For this episode, I had the privilege of talking with Tami Nesting and Sara Rose Hansen about the importance of stem cell donations. Tami is a retired teacher and acute lymphoblastic leukemia survivor. Sara Rose is the NMDP member recruitment coordinator for the Northwest Territory, covering Washington, Oregon, Montana, and Wyoming. A quick note that NMDP is formerly known as the National Marrow Donor Program, or Be the Match. In this episode, Tami shares her story and how life-changing and impactful her bone marrow transplant was as a patient. She describes herself as an ordinary person who received an extraordinary miracle and now dedicates her time to volunteering with NMDP. Sara Rose shares more about NMDP, what the donation process is like, how to submit a sample, and what to expect if you receive that life-changing call that you're a match. When it comes to blood cancers, including leukemia and lymphoma, it's an understatement that stem cell donations and stem cell donors are truly critical in helping to save people's lives as they're undergoing treatment for these cancers. Did you know that you, listening to this podcast right now, could participate and sign up to literally help save someone else's life? To receive a free swab kit in the mail, which you'll learn more about in this episode, you can text Cancer Pathways, so it's capital C and capital P in all one word. So Cancer Pathways, all one word, capital C and capital P, to 61474. So again, you can text Cancer Pathways, capital C, capital P, all one word, no space in between the two letters or words, to 61474. I will also have a link in this episode's description. If you're unsure about participating, I would highly encourage you to keep listening to this episode to learn more about the program and how it impacted Tami's life. Here's my conversation with Tami and Sara Rose. Tami and Sara Rose, thank you both so much for being here today. I think we're going to start with you, Tami. I would love to hear a brief overview of your story leading up to needing a bone marrow transplant.
Thank you, Lauren, for inviting me to be here. It's always such a pleasure to share the story and all the great things that are happening around bone marrow transplants. My whole story actually began in the fall of 2019 when I was absolutely perfectly 100% healthy. And then all of a sudden, it was the very first week of school. I just felt really tired. But it was the first week of school, so everybody is tired. And I had just come back from swimming with the pigs in Exuma. So I was tired, but didn't really think anything of it. And then, you know how the first week of school, you go out for the fire drill to find out where your spot is on the line? So we did that, and I walked out, and I was too tired to come back into the building. Which is weird. And the kids knew something was up because normally I run around that track with them every day after school. So they went and got the nurse, and she came and she's like, something's wrong. And I'm like, yeah, but I got to teach these classes. So finished the day, and then after school went to the clinic and got the blood test. Results came in at 8:00 the next morning. It was a Friday morning. My doctor called and she's like, it's acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It moves really fast. You need to be in the hospital at 11 o'clock.
Oh my gosh.
11 o'clock that very same day, we started chemotherapy, and that set the ball rolling. Like there's no time to think or to process or what's going on. We're just doing it.
So you went from like fatigue to diagnosis in like that short of a time frame?
3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fast. And so then the chemo worked and everything was good until it wasn't. And around Christmas, we found out that I had a little bit of leukemia again, and they planned everything, they scheduled everything, and I was transferred over to care in Seattle and scheduled for a bone marrow transplant.
So, kind of general high level, what is a bone marrow transplant and why would someone need one?
Very high level and very simplified Tami science. But to start back at the beginning, stem cells are really just undefined cells. You make them in your bone marrow, so that's where all of our bone comes from. And our body is so miraculous in that it will make these little undefined cells and then send them wherever your body needs. They can become anything, and we know how to do that. Your body makes about 2.4 million new cells every second. So that's a lot of multiplication, and things can go a little bit wrong. And normally when that happens, your body also knows that, switches out that mutant cell, and life goes on. But every now and again, for whatever reason, it doesn't catch it. The mutant cell multiplies, and that becomes, in my case, leukemia. So anyone who has a bone cancer, or a blood cancer or a blood disease is going to need to have their blood taken out and new stem cells put in that will automatically jump in and become their new blood. It's a really amazing, incredible process.
It is so incredible. It makes me think of the book Between Two Kingdoms by Suleika Jawad. She had a blood cancer, leukemia, and so she had to have a bone marrow transplant. And so her story was just intense and, inspiring the way that she writes the book, but just like really goes through that transplant process, and really kind of paints a picture for readers of how intense it is, both physically and emotionally. So I'd love to know for you, how was that transplant process like?
So it's really kind of crazy. Like in terms of process, it's no big deal. I didn't even go to the hospital. It was just
Oh my
in a
gosh.
room at the clinic. I got up that morning, walked over. I was fully awake. The nurses hooked up my lines and they started the stem cells. It was just like getting a blood transfusion. No drama, no big deal. It took a couple of hours because they put the cells in slowly. And after that, I just got up and walked home. It was about a mile back to the place where I was staying. So I think the walking actually was a really big part of my recovery. Being able to walk there and walk back kept everything moving, but not a lot of drama.
So what about the recovery? What was the recovery like after the transplant?
That's the big question, and that's where it gets really complicated. After you go through transplant, you've really got like a new person living inside of you, or a new organ, because it's your blood. And so my immune system and her transplanted cells, they would sometimes start to fight because you're both strong, go get them women. And that's called graft versus host disease.
And to be clear, you received stem cells from somebody who donated their stem cells, which we'll talk a little bit, or we'll learn a little bit more about from Sara Rose.
Yes.
That whole process. Yeah.
And ironically, my stem cell donor's name was also Sara.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she was in Germany and she donated her cells. So it's incredible. So the graft versus host disease is interesting, can range from no big deal to life-threatening. You can't predict it. Doctors don't know. You don't know where it's going to happen or what's going to become of it. But because of that, I'm still on immunosuppression and probably will be for a good long while.
So it's basically your immune system, and this is probably such a simplified way of putting this, but your immune system kind of being like, what's up? Like, I'm not recognizing these cells, even though they are considered a match.
Exactly.
Okay. And then do you have any tips for how patients can prepare for a bone marrow transplant?
So they do everything for you. Like, it's a crazy, fully supported process. You wind up having to move to wherever your transplant's going to take place a couple weeks prior to the transplant, and that you meet with your doctors and your team 8 hours a day, every single day, and they do baseline testing, get everything established, figure out where you are. And my doctors were so patient, and they walked me through every single procedure, every step of the way. even showed me what the rooms were going to look at. When you walk into a room that's lined with plastic because of radiation, that's a lot to take in, but we did it ahead of time. So they were awesome and got prepared, explained everything into the most minute detail. Hindsight now, I realize I had no idea what they were talking about, which for me was probably better because I didn't have time to get nervous or worried about it. We were just moving ahead and they knew what they were doing and they fully supported me and I was comfortable and felt like I knew them and trusted them. So we could move ahead.
And then what about in that post transplant process? I've heard a lot about people having to be like secluded by themselves because of, fear of being exposed to other viruses, bacteria, things like that. What was that process like for you?
Well, I did it during COVID, so
Yeah, okay. So everybody was already kind of by themselves for the most part.
yes, actually, that made my life somewhat easier because everybody was in lockdown. It was difficult because I had to do a lot of things alone, but so did everybody.
hmm I mean, were the precautions a little extra because of COVID as well?
Yes, I had to move to the Pete Gross house, which is like a sterile, isolated house where I never saw anybody.
Mm.
I had to have a caregiver with me 24/7 within arm's reach because if something starts to go astray, you got to get to the hospital really quickly. Um, I was either in that room or in the hospital for that whole process.
hmm
And germs were everything, at times, I would have so few white cells, like I couldn't even eat food from the hospital because it was too dirty.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's intense, but that's where processed food comes in and is good for you.
Yeah. And then how long was that recovery process for you?
I had my transplant on July 7th and I was supposed to be able to move home the 1st of October, but they were taking good care of me, so I stayed until Thanksgiving.
hmm and then how has life changed for you post-transplant? Are there any additional precautions you have to take?
Uh, Everything about my life has changed, some for the better. Yeah, no, for the better. I still have to be really careful about fatigue. I get tired really easily. And so I'm kind of at the point now where I can do whatever I want to do. But in my planning to do something, I also have to make sure that I plan for how am I going to recover? What's that going to look like? Where am I going to do that? Make sure that that's as important part of my day as going out and doing whatever I want to do. Germs are always an ongoing thing. I don't have the energy to teach or the stamina to teach full time anymore, so I'm home. But I get to volunteer. I go for long walks. I take yoga classes every day. I get to like enjoy a cup of tea and read a book without that kind of stress. And really, I just appreciate the luxury of doing only what I want to do. And that's what I do every day. So,
Yeah. Well, for those who don't know, Tami is in our book club at Cancer Pathways, and that's how I learned about the really cool and interesting volunteer work that she does, which is what precipitated this episode. She connected me with Sarah Rose. So Tami, as a patient and a survivor, what does the NMDP program mean to you, and how did you kind of get involved with it?
so knowing that if I hadn't found a match, my original expiration date was March 2020. So thanks to them, I have all of these bonus days, which look like they're going to continue well into the future. I didn't have a match in my family, and I just can't imagine it would have been possible for me as an individual to have found my one donor in all the world who happens to live in a small town in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, she hasn't been matched to anybody else. I mean, that's a really incredible miracle. So
Mm-hmm.
without the donor program, we wouldn't have been able to connect. Um, I connected with the volunteer program because I finally was able to send my donor a thank you note. And so I went online to find out how to do that. And that's where I saw that they were doing a registration drive just a couple of miles from me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds kind of cool. And so I just called up and said, hey, I'd like to volunteer. And the rest is history.
Amazing. I love that. So what do you do as a volunteer?
So I do whatever they need me to do that day, and I'm happy just to be there. But what I really enjoy doing is greeting people and just letting them know, like, this is an incredible process, and I'm kind of witness to it. It works. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
really truly can save a life by doing this little volunteer. So I enjoy meeting people. I really love it when we do a registration drive on like a college campus with all of the young people, because
Mm-hmm.
they're so positive and enthusiastic and optimistic. And I just know from being around them that they have the power to change the world. So that's a great gift back to me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tami, for just sharing a little bit more about what that transplant process was like for you. I think it is really good for people to hear what a bone marrow transplant process is like, especially if they are a little bit concerned or it's kind of in their future. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk about this. And thank you to all of you out there who may or already have been stem cell donors.
I'm going to turn to Sara Rose now, who is a member recruitment coordinator with NMDP. Sara Rose, can you tell us a little bit more about the program?
Yes. So NMDP is a global leader in cellular therapy. What we do is facilitate stem cell transplants for patients that have blood cancers and blood diseases that are treatable by stem cell transplant.
Awesome. And just so listeners are aware, you guys did recently rebrand to NMDP, is that correct?
Yes, we were recruiting under the name Be the Match for about 15 years. And we have just rebranded to NMDP, which we have actually always been NMDP. The doctors still refer to us as NMDP. We're congressionally recognized as NMDP. It used to stand for National Marrow Donor Program, but now we've outgrown our acronym. We're no longer national, we are international. We're
Amazing.
usually not getting a marrow donation. Most of the time, it's through peripheral blood stem cells. We're very much about supporting the donors, but also now the patients, their families, and research. And we wouldn't call ourselves a program, we're definitely an organization.
Awesome. I just like to definitely make listeners aware of that change since I feel like a lot of the public tends to know and hear about Be the Match. So really, really good to know that it's NMDP. Can you kind of walk us through the process on how someone can submit their sample to enter into the registry?
Yes, absolutely. It's super easy. What they'll do is they'll either text a join code like cancer pathways, all one word, to 61474, or they can scan in a QR code. And either way, they will be taken to a registration screen on their phone where they go through a few questions where we're just making sure that they are eligible to join the registry. Then it's a quick cheek swab. If they're in person at an event, we do it right then and there. If they are not in person, we can have a swab kit shipped to their home. And then they just swab their cheeks, 10 seconds on each side, put it back in the kit, and we send that off to the lab.
Awesome. And then is there any age requirement for people participating in the swab?
There is. Thank you for asking. So, people between the ages of 18 and 40 can join the registry. And the reason that we do have that age requirement is, all of our cells, our hair cells, skin cells, that's why it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? Our cells just aren't as healthy and robust. They don't replicate as quickly as we age. So we want our patients to have the best possible outcome with their stem cell transplant. So it's crucial that we have those healthy, young, strong cells.
That makes sense. So you're listening to this podcast episode, you pull up you grab your phone, you type in cancer pathways at that text number, you get the kit in the mail, you swab your cheek. What happens if you get that call and you're selected as a match?
Yes. So first you celebrate because you have the opportunity to save somebody's life. What we'll do is we'll ask you if you're willing to move forward. We sure hope that everyone that joins the registry understands that commitment and is looking forward to saying yes when they get that call. And then we will send you to have some confirmatory blood typing. It's just a blood draw at a local center. You just go where it's convenient for you, and we have that sent to our lab. If that goes through and you're still the best possible match for the patient, we will move forward with scheduling a physical for you to make sure that you're healthy enough to donate. And then we'll go ahead and schedule the donation itself. The donation can happen two different ways. You might be asked to donate peripheral blood stem cells, which is actually 90% of the time. This is the method that we use, where you're hooked up to an apheresis machine, and it's just like donating platelets or plasma. It's the same exact process.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's super easy. 90% of the time, that's going to be the process. 10% of the time, someone may be asked to donate bone marrow, and that is also an outpatient procedure under general anesthesia. Any residual soreness with that kind of feels like you slipped and fell on the ice and maybe hit your backside. You're going to feel a little bruised for a couple days, but that's it. So either way, it's a non-invasive outpatient procedure. And your cells are then taken by a courier and flown wherever in the world your patient is waiting for them.
So good to know, because I've donated blood, quite a handful of times. And I feel like whenever I think about like NMDP or signing up for the registry, my brain always goes to like bone marrow donors. So really good to know that it's almost just like donating platelets and 90% of the time.
Yes.
And then who covers those donation expenses? It sounds like NMDP really helps to facilitate the process.
Yeah, definitely. So we do cover 100% of the expenses. We actually pay for transportation, the travel for the donor, a hotel room. We compensate for meals, and we also take care of any lost wages. And that's going to be for the donor and for a companion to join them on their trip.
That is so awesome. So I hear a lot about the importance of diversifying the database. Why is it important for more people to participate and submit a sample?
Yes, that's a great question. So what we're getting with the cheek swab is a sample of your HLA tissue type. That stands for human leukocyte antigen. It's similar to DNA, but it's actually the proteins that make up all the cells in your body. So it's your protein tissue type that we're sampling. That is passed down genetically from your parents. So therefore, it does have a lot to do with your ethnic background. And depending on how rare someone's HLA tissue type is based on their ethnic diversity, they may or may not have more chances for a match on the registry. So the more that we add people of different ethnic backgrounds, the more we're getting equity on that registry, and everyone will be receiving the same chance to survive the same blood cancers and diseases as anybody else.
Absolutely. So if you're listening to the podcast and you're inspired, you want to pull out your phone and sign up to swab your cheek to be entered into the registry, but you're a little bit nervous still about submitting a sample, how can people find support in other ways?
Yeah, definitely. Well, our website is a wealth of knowledge. You can definitely go down a rabbit hole on the nmdp.org website. So definitely starting there and really doing some research and seeing if it's right for you. If you don't feel like you're ready to join the registry, but you still want to help, we always can use volunteers at those in-person events. You can go to volunteer.nmdp.org to search for different events in your area. We can also use your help with creating a campaign yourself and hosting your own donor drive. We can send you a box of supplies and get you all set up so that you can swab your circle and utilize your connections to help us diversify and grow the registry.
Awesome. And you guys have clearly heard the benefit that this organization has had for Tami since she shared her story as a patient and a survivor. I'm curious, Sarah Rose, do you have a story of a particularly touching or memorable experience out in the community?
Yes, absolutely. So we actually had a patient who was receiving treatment at Fred Hutch, and he had gotten a stem cell transplant. And he actually came out to the University of Washington to table with us. And it was so moving to have someone there going through it in the moment. He was all masked up and everything. We were being very careful to keep him safe. But it really touched a lot of the students there. And we, had posters made of him and everything. And so it's just really moving to see the whole mission come together in a moment like that. And that's also how I feel about our volunteers like Tami, who have been through it and are there continuing to further our mission and helping save other lives, just paying it forward.
Absolutely. Seeing that process from like start to finish must be so gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'd love to wrap up today just by playing a quick myth or fact game. So you'll tell me, I'm going to read off a few different statements and you'll tell me if it's a myth or a fact.
Okay.
So the first one is that the donation process is painful.
Myth, 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 myth. There are a lot of misconceptions about this because of TV shows and movies where they dramatize the whole process. We've come a long way in the over 35 years that we have been facilitating these transplants. And like I had mentioned earlier, 90% of the time, the process is essentially through an apheresis blood draw. And then 10% of the time, it is that bone marrow donation. And that's where people kind of get up in their hackles about it. But it's important for folks to know that you are under general anesthesia while this procedure is happening. So you're not going to feel anything. And what we're doing is going in through your iliac crest, which is the back of your tailbone, back of your pelvic bone, I'm sorry. And that's the most porous bone in your body. And we're going through with a tiny, tiny needle that is the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. And we're just going in through those very, very thin spots, and it's minimally invasive. And as I mentioned earlier, when you wake up, you kind of feel a little bruised sensation back there, but that residual soreness is just going to go away in a couple of days, and your cells have gone on to potentially save somebody's life.
Awesome. So the next myth or fact, sharing my personal genetic information is risky.
Yeah, I'm happy that you asked that. So we actually run a double-blind registry where the registration that you're completing on your phone goes into the registry. And then your HLA tissue type sample goes into the biorepository. And those two don't talk to each other unless you're a match for someone.
All right. And then really good to know just about the actual procedure itself, because I didn't know like the ballpoint pen and just how non-invasive it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is tragic that is just the general misconception, because really it is such a simple procedure and we're really taking care of our donors. We're waiting on them hand and foot. We're making sure they have their favorite snacks. We're making sure that they're comfortable. As I mentioned before, they're going to have a companion with them. And we're going to take care of all expenses so that someone can join them through the process.
I will say too, if you are someone who goes to donate via the apheresis machine or, donating platelets, I totally understand too when some people have hesitancy or nervousness with needles. There's also a lot of like workarounds to kind of overcoming that in some ways. One of our staff members who is a leukemia survivor. She obviously had to get poked and prodded so much. And so she was talking about this little like pin pricker device where it's like if you push it on your skin, you're feeling the pokes in all these different areas. So you're not noticing like when the needle gets inserted. And I'm forgetting the actual name for it right now, but there's all these little things that you can do to kind of make the donation process a little bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also medications that we can prescribe and get to you so that it's taking the edge off a little bit. And then, we have a collection center in Seattle, actually, in downtown Seattle, that only does these peripheral blood stem cell collections.
Mm.
And they only have 2 patients a day, and they're putting you in your own private room. You can Chromecast your Netflix up onto the screen. You've got your buddy there with you, and we're getting you your favorite snacks. And it's just, we make it a good experience for anyone that is lucky enough to get that call and say yes.
Yes, definitely making it as comfortable as possible. So my last one, myth or fact, I could actually save someone's life.
Fact. I can actually tell you from experience, I have been on both sides of this, not as a patient, but my dad actually survived lymphoma because someone on the other side of the world swabbed their cheek one day and said yes when they got the call that they were a match for my father. And I was helping take care of him at that time, going through that process, and just watching him receive that bag of stem cells, and they just hook it up on an IV, and just watching that drip into his body and hoping that this was going to save my father's life. Just being so thankful that somebody did that and they did save his life. And then I actually was able to turn around a year later and donate to a man in Germany with leukemia. Wow. Yeah. And so I was able to pay it forward and turn that around and literally save someone else's life. And so I can definitely say with full certainty, you can save someone's life. You can give them more time with their family and their friends. And it's just such a simple way to join and such an easy process to donate. So I'm so grateful for you, Lauren, for asking me to come on to your podcast and just let people know what this process really is.
Of course, that's so inspiring and so powerful that you were really able to see both sides of it, it impacting your dad and then also being able to be a donor yourself. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing. Thank you to NMDP. I'm really excited to be able to put this podcast episode out there so that it can reach more people. And hopefully we can work on just continuing to diversify and build out the database even further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Okay, are you feeling inspired? I know I left my conversation with Tami and Sara Rose feeling so inspired to get more involved and to do something so simple like submitting my sample to potentially have a huge impact. If you would like to join the registry, you can text, once again, Cancer Pathways, all one word with capital C and capital P to the number 61474. You'll see a brief video with 4 things you should know prior to signing up, and then you'll fill out a brief form. After that, you will be mailed a free testing and swab kit. I will also have a link to this sign-up form in our episode description. Programs like these truly make a life-changing difference, so if you've ever wanted to help out or support the cancer community, but you aren't quite sure how, here's a really easy first step. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something new, and until next time, please stay healthy and well.